In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Please be seated. At our church, I've become familiar with saints or commemorated individuals, mainly through two activities. One involving worship, the other involving a game. The first activity is our Eucharist, our prayer service held at noon on Thursdays. The saint with his or her feast day closest to the service becomes the subject of a short homily. The second activity is called Lent Madness, a game developed in 2010 for participants who want to combine their love of sports with their passion for the lives of saints. If you open your folded sermon insert, another insert, you will see 32 saints placed in a single elimination bracket, like that used to track the NCAA basketball tournament. At 5 consecutive Lenten soup suppers held at our church, participants come to review the biographies of these saints, discuss their pros and cons, and then vote for their favorite candidate. The All Saints Church's Golden Halo is then awarded to the winner of the last round. Now, Lent Madness using one computer has also become international in scope, involving thousands of participants. A woman who was a runner-up to the winner of the International Golden Halo in 2014, as shown on your insert, was Harriet Bedell. She was nominated for commemoration by the Diocese of Southwest Florida at the Episcopal Church's General Convention of 2006 and was approved for commemoration at the next General Convention of 2009. The rest of my sermon is devoted to Bedell's story. You may be asking, why is Sue, Reverend Sue, Mother Sue, we have to decide. Why is she so passionate about Harriet Bedell? First, she's the closest I've ever come in space and time to a person commemorated by the Episcopal Church. In Florida, I've walked where she's walked, and I've talked to people who actually knew her. Second, her life exemplified what a determined woman can do when she loves and trusts God. Third, since we moved to Naples, Florida in 2009, she's had a very significant influence on my spiritual life. When I began to serve as an assisting priest in nearby St. Mark's Episcopal Church, I celebrated for nearly 5 years a healing service every Wednesday evening in Bedell's Memorial Chapel. And if you'll open up your insert, up in the left-hand corner is a picture of this chapel. Yes, well-behaved pets were always welcome at our services there. The chapel's most striking feature is a large painted mural of the Everglades behind the altar. Unfortunately, in this picture, you can only see about half of it. However, if you want to see the whole mural, as well as to obtain further information on some of the places and terms I'll be talking about in the sermon, I have some books and pictures and maps over at Memorial Hall that you can view after the service. Harriet Bedell was born in Buffalo, New York in 1875. She trained as a school teacher, and she was still unmarried at the age of 31, and she remained single her entire life. Although then employed in a secure position as a teacher in the Buffalo school system, she had a conversion experience while listening to an Episcopal missionary describing the many needs of mission work. So in 1906, she applied to and was accepted by the New York Training School of Deaconesses, where her one-year course of study included instruction in religious matters, missions, teaching, hygiene, and hospital nursing. Her first choice was to be sent to China, but her widowed mother and siblings discouraged her from taking such an assignment. Even if she wasn't sent abroad, soliciting one's own funds through furloughs granted every 3 years was difficult, and the work was always physically demanding. Following her training, Bedell was first sent as a missionary teacher to the Cheyenne Indians at Whirlwind Mission in Oklahoma in 1907. There, she essentially ran the mission. Thus, the Indians informally called her boss lady. That's another term that I might consider. Or formally bird woman, after they honorably adopted her into their tribe. Because of her experience in both teaching and working with Indians, in 1916, an Episcopal bishop requested that Bedell consider an assignment in Alaska. Although somewhat reluctant, she nevertheless accepted the request, arriving in Stevens Point, Alaska in 1916, just before the river froze over for the winter, which means you can't get from here to there during that time. On a furlough to the lower 48 states in 1922, she was set apart as a deaconess at the 47th General Convention. When she returned to Alaska in 1923, she served at Alachikin, just 40 miles south of the Arctic Circle, where she sometimes traveled by dog sled to remote villages. During her last years in Alaska, she also opened a boarding school. However, by 1931, funds were scarce, so that Bedell traveled to New York to plead for more contributions. Because of the Great Depression, there was little available money, and there were no funds for her to return to Alaska. Through speaking engagements and articles she published before and after her service in Alaska, Bedell was invited to visit a Seminole Indian reservation in southern Florida in 1932. When she saw it, she was shocked. And as was characteristic of her, she said so. The place was nothing but a tourist trap. The artifacts and costumes were phony. To her, the worst thing about it was that the Indians themselves were on exhibition. Show Indian crafts, she said, but never Indians. It was obvious to Bedell that the church's work among the Indians in Florida had been allowed to lapse, and she felt a compulsion to refurbish it. Bedell immediately went after and got a temporary assignment there in 1932, one that lasted 28 years. The arrangement was that she was to live in Everglades City, located about 35 miles southeast of Naples, near what became Everglades National Park in 1947. As part of her arrangement, she was given a Model A Ford, one of the few cars she had ever ridden in. I'm not sure if she'd ever driven in, and the first one she'd ever owned. Those who rode with her on the dirt and mud-mired roads of southern Florida's swamp did so out of necessity and at their own peril. I can attest that many of these roads are still in the same shape today. Bedell admitted that the Seminoles were the toughest Indians that she had ever dealt with. When she finally did reach them, it was through their pocketbooks. The Indians needed money, and Bedell let the word get around that she would buy their traditional craft work at the mission. She could sell these items at her Everglades City, Blade Cross mission, and up north. Her breakthrough approach helped revive doll making, basket weaving, and intricate patchwork designs. The Seminoles started bringing in their crafts, and from then on, one thing led to another. Gradually, she was accepted as a helpful friend who respected the Indian way of life and beliefs. She never tried to make them over into the white person's image, economically, sociologically, or religiously. Marya Ripko used a picture of Bedell in her advertising approach, which is contained in your sermon insert. This full page here is just a copy of that book. To grace the cover of the biography, she wrote about the deaconess in 2009. A copy of her book is available next door. Bedell's unique approach is commonly used in the missionary field today. The ultimate acceptance came when Bedell was invited by the men to take part in a Seminole burial service, the most guarded and mysterious of all tribal rites. Few, if any, white people had been so honored. At the end of a long silent period at the beginning of the ceremony, the Indian in charge looked at Bedell and said, without warning, "Go ahead." Without any foreknowledge of Seminole protocol, she rose to the occasion. In a tremendous feat of mental agility, she read the 23rd Psalm, translating it into Seminole language as she went along, and at the same time transposing it out of the Hebrew pastoral setting into local words and pictures the Seminoles would understand. Here, in part, is how it came out. The Great Spirit watches over us. He is our guide in our life. If we can speak truly to Him, can we be empty in our lives? He feeds us in our lands and leads us beside the waters of comfort. He shall make our spirits good and put our feet on the path of goodness, because He is our Father. When the bad times come, when we walk in the shadow of death, we need fear no bad things. Surely, the love and mercy of the Spirit, who watches over all of us, will be with us all the days of our lives, and we will always be welcome in the great Chikee. Now, as shown in the bottom left-hand side of your sermon insert, a Chikee is a crude structure the Seminoles build. It consists of 4 poles supporting a palm thatched roof. The sides are open, with an option for a wooden floor about 3 feet above the ground. It is the only kind of building her audience was familiar with, and they had no difficulty with the concept of a heavenly home in the form of an immense Chikee. Another one of the biggest events of Bedell's life occurred on December 6, 1947, when Everglades National Park was dedicated. She gave the invocation. President Truman was there with many other dignitaries, and she had lunch with them at the historic Rod and Gun Club located in Everglades City, where Bill and I have often eaten. Bedell said Truman seemed an all right gentleman, even if he was a Baptist. Although the record documents that Bedell retired in 1943 at the age of 68, her retirement was not noticeable. For 17 more years, She went right on working with the Seminoles, just as she'd been always doing, driving her car an average of 20,000 miles per year before retiring in her mid-80s. Battelle was the kind that could only be dislodged from her job by a major hurricane, Donna, which severely damaged southern Florida in 1960. And although she agreed she could not go back to Everglades City, she first had to see what Donna had done to her Indians and to be satisfied that they were all right. Then she moved to a Bishop Gray Inn in Davenport, Florida, only about 30 miles from Kissimmee, where Bill and I first lived when we moved to Florida in 2004, until they were sold to private entities by the National Church. Such inns throughout Florida provided retirement accommodations for Episcopalians. Talking to people who knew Battelle, and I have to say our diocesan historian was 99 when she retired. She never left any doubt about how she felt about anything, often without being asked. She was a loner, preferring to be the one in charge. She did not engage in small talk or foolishness. She was on the Lord's business, and that, she knew, is the most important business there is. When she was on her furloughs, bishops, priests, and parishioners alike used to hide behind pillars when they saw her coming at diocesan or general conventions. They knew a meeting with her meant that they would depart with an assignment or a pledge of monetary support for her Seminoles. In retrospect, Battelle lived out her life based on her second choice. She wanted China, and she got Indians. But instead of feeling cheated, she made a full creative life out of that second choice. Her life focus was bringing Indians to Christ, but always by being accepting of their culture. Excuse me. Deaconess Harriet Battelle, often called the Angel of the Swamp, died 9 years after she moved to Davenport at the age of 94. She was welcomed into the Great Chiquis, January 8, 1969, now designated as her feast day. I am sure she received kudos and, talk about this later, a golden halo from Jesus Christ then, regardless of her runner-up status in the International Lent Madness competition of 2014. Amen.